Thank you so much for coming. My name is Susie Hughes, and I'm the Director of Communications for Appier. And on behalf of Appier, welcome and happy International Women's Day. So it's been my pleasure to organize this panel with GA and SGInnovate. Appier is a leading AI company, and we help marketers make better decisions powered by AI. And as a growing company in the technology space, we certainly shoulder some of the responsibility to make sure we're advocating for diversity and inclusion in technology. And that includes, of course, not just gender, but education, race, backgrounds, nationalities, lifestyle, all kinds of things to make sure that we are bringing diverse viewpoints that help us solve problems more quickly and drive business forward. And you will hear a bit more from my colleague Jennifer about that on the panel. So thanks again, and now I will hand you over to Aziza from GA, who will also be your moderator today.
Thank you, Susie. So thank you so much to Susie from Appier for organizing this with us, to SGInnovate for this beautiful venue, and to Gabriella from GA who organized this. First up, guys, I want to say I'm really impressed that so many of you guys turned out here at 9 a.m. on a Friday morning. Thank you for doing that, by the way. I'm really excited about our panel today, and we've got, representation from a number of different fields. So without further ado, I'm going to call them up on stage. We've got Thana. She was a former nominated member of parliament, and she was also leading the Women's Committee for our labor union. We've got Jennifer, who is one of the directors at Appier. So she's flown in from Taiwan for this. Thank you. And we've got Suchitra, who is with, sorry guys, would you mind if I just move you guys one step? Sorry. It's a little bit easier. So Suchitra runs the venture building at SGInnovate. How many of you guys are familiar with SGInnovate? Okay, great. Many of you guys. That's great. So first up, to start with, Suchitra, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit more about what you do, and especially with the context of SGInnovate and your journey, but we'll keep it quite quick for intros.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Suchitra, Suchi for short, if that's easier to remember. I'm a part of the venture building team at SGInnovate. So once we invest in deep tech startups, we've got an entire team that supports the startups to ensure they don't fall off the tracks. So whether it's in terms of commercial or go-to-market strategies or support, my background is consulting. It is very much in advisory for go-to-market. That's a quick one.
Sounds good. And what about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Oops. A bit of echo. Okay, here we go. All right, so hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Hong, and I'm coming from Appier. So as mentioned earlier, that I actually come here from Taiwan to see every one of you here. So happy International Women's Day. So I come from Appier. I lead the marketing and growth team in Appier. Appier, as Susie mentioned before, we're an AI company. We help marketers to make better decisions with AI. So essentially, we're a MarTech and AdTech company. Okay, and before Appier, I was with consulting. I'm in McKinsey & Company for over 5 years. In between, I went to Wharton to get my MBA. So that is where I start to find out the importance of diversity and start to be an advocate for such topic. So yeah, that's about me.
A very good morning to everyone. My name is Tana, in short. I come from the labor movement. I'm the president of the Healthcare Services Employees Union. This industry has got 80% female populated, working force. And I'm also the member of the NTUC Central Committee and chairing the Women's Committee in NTUC. And there's a lot of things that we talk about diversity, but my specialty is basically in gender diversity, at all levels, including the board levels. And there's a lot of things I would like to share with you because I think Singapore has made progress, but I think we can hasten the progress a little. So I'm very happy to be with you. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you guys for that quick intro. So I'm excited for the next 45 minutes with you. Sana, I like that you kind of touched the topic of like diversity and where you think Singapore is at. Tell us, like, in your opinion, where are we with the state of diversity and inclusion in Singapore? Not just in terms of gender, but also in terms of racial, in terms of like, accommodating people with different abilities, etc.
Okay, thanks for the question. I think Singapore has made a lot of progress, like what I've said earlier, in terms of language, race, nationality, as well as in inclusion of people with disability, and not forgetting gender and all that. Importantly, these changes did not come overnight. There were pockets of people advocating, championing for certain parity in the society. So over the years, we have come a long way, and we pride ourselves to be a multiracial and multicultural society. And what do we mean by multiracial, multicultural? And we pride ourselves to call ourselves a metropolitan country. It all means that we embrace diversity, we embrace talents, we embrace people who can make a difference to the society of Singapore in one way or another. People who can make a difference to the economy of Singapore. So whoever who want to come to Singapore, we welcome you with red carpet. So having said that, I think there'll be questions later on why is there a foreign quota and all that. So later on we will address those questions. I'm very well aware that your mind is tabulating on all these questions. But certainly if you look at the onlook of Singapore itself, I think in the region of ASEAN, we have been very, very embracing diversity in a much, aggressive manner. We need that because our only resource is manpower, no other resource. So in what way have we done pretty well in this area? If you look at Singapore itself, we need talents. In the industry, ICT industry, we know we are not there. We welcome, we embrace talents. There's a lot of foreign experts, expatriates and talents that will come across the sea to come to Singapore and work in Singapore in ICT sector. We welcome them, regardless of nationality. It's the talent that you bring in, okay, that matters. If you look at industries like healthcare, I tell you, if you ask any healthcare worker, they really love foreign talents, especially nurses. They say, we can't do without you. We can't do without you. Why? Firstly, our fertility rate is not that high. We are still hovering around 1.1, 1.2. We are close to 1.2, let's say that. And without that manpower, where are we going to get people? We're going to get people, right? We need to have like instant noodle, instant people. So this is where we open doors. And in the healthcare sector, we have opened the doors, and if you walk into any hospitals, you will see a lot of foreign talents there, helping our society, helping our aged, helping our people, to get well, to get better. So that is one sector that we go. So if you go sector by sector, because this is important, to go sector by sector, we always have a proportion of foreign talents to teachers. We learn from them, and we also ensure that our people progress along with it. So that is one point. The other point, that board gender. So if you look at board gender, we are not there yet. Only 1 in 10 are female. So we have this target, 20-20-20. Means we try to get 20%, at least 20% in the board to be female. by the year 2020.
Yep, I definitely want to ask you about the board agenda later, and I want to hear your thoughts on some of the movements around it. And Sana, thank you so much for those points. I'm going to come back to you in about a couple of minutes with questions around, because you advocate for diversity and, workers' rights. I want to ask your thoughts on discrimination in a while. But before that, I want to move to Jennifer. So you work for, a tech company in AI, and we've seen in the past 1 to 2 years all of the things that have happened with certain tech companies. What are your thoughts on why it's so much more important right now to focus on diversity and inclusion?
Yep. Yeah, so I think that is a very good question. So if you think about it, right now, I have to be very honest that in the tech company, it's still a man-dominate company, men-dominate industries.
Do you feel like, especially in the industry you're in, AI?
I wouldn't say AI, I would say TMT, tech in general. It's a more male-dominant industry at the moment. However, Appier, along with a lot of growing companies, we are actually working on it to change it. And the reason why we think it is so critical at the moment, and sorry to throw out some theoretical numbers. So according to one of the McKinsey research that I did in my previous job, that actually top quartile of company that actually having a more diversified profile have 35% higher financial returns. So you may want to take that in mind as one of the indicator when you do your future stock investment too. Yeah, so basically we find out that diversity actually gives the company more energy, more diversified problem-solving method, and that is how actually make things happen quickly and make companies stay more competitive. And especially for the tech company, because things are changing so rapidly every day. So we believe that diversity is even more important for technology industry more than any other industry, and is for today more than any other day before.
Okay, and what are some of the ways that, at Appier you guys try to have either processes or systems or policies in place to encourage, say, unbiased hiring or diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So I believe our philosophy is equity over equality. It sounds a little bit, let me explain that. So equality, if I give you an example, is if the government want to give public transportation for everyone, but they turn out to give everyone a bike. But it's basically equality. You just try to make sure you give everyone the same thing, but you didn't consider where they're coming from, what is their background, whether they cannot ride a bike, whether they are too short for a bike, something like that. So instead, you actually need to think about if you want to enable everyone to communicate, so you actually need to give them the appropriate tool. For some people, it could be subway. For some people, it can be share bike, etc. I think we'll apply the same philosophy in our hiring. So when we do the hiring process, we try to make it standardized for everyone follow the same process. However, during the process, we want to make sure that every candidate, no matter what their background is, has the most suitable method to shine in the way. So if they are good at coding in certain scenarios, we will give them that instead of just making everyone to code at the same.
That's great. So it's skills-based hiring versus
Exactly.
looking at people's grades or GPA.
Exactly.
I'm hoping nobody ever asked for my GPA in my life. So Suchitra, you run venture building at SGInnovate, and you guys focus on deep tech startup. Tell us a little bit more about, what kind of diversity you see there or the lack thereof.
Ooh, deep question. How much time do we have? So I guess a couple of things. One is to add on to Jennifer's comment. It sort of flows from there because we are deep tech, which means things like artificial intelligence, quantum, space exploration, blockchain, all of that. Now, having been a computer engineer, and I did work in Silicon Valley, I will tell you that it is not, even today, it is not a place where we see a lot of women on the floor. I was telling my boss yesterday that the first time when I got the job, there were 40 engineers in my team, all men. We were designing integrated circuits. The first thing I did when I got my offer letter was I went to Macy's and I got 6 chinos and polo t-shirts because I wanted to look like them, right? It's you want to blend in, but it is the reality, right? That is what it is in computer science, but it is the same in deep tech as well. We have very few female founders for a lot of reasons, folks. I mean, it's not just because we don't study technology, it's also because to found a company, you have a little bit of work experience, you start thinking through a startup, you might be in your late 20s, early 30s, and that's when we decide to have kids. So, things get put out for a while, and maybe that's also contributing to us not, being present. But, what you were talking about in terms of diversity, I just wanted to add a point. One of the reasons that I'm personally passionate about it is not because, I want higher pay or I want to see more women doing a particular job. It's because I was reading an article. If you look at car tests that are done in Europe, even today, right, the dummies that are used for car tests are male dummies that are on the 70th percentile for men, which is 70 kgs, 177 centimeters. I'm 5'3", I'm barely 50 kg, right? The chances of me surviving a car crash are far lower than a guy who'd be 70 kg. That's not acceptable. We need to fix that. And do you know where they test for dummies with women of 50 kg? In the passenger seat. How many women drive in this audience? A lot of us, and we're not safe, simply because they can't be bothered using dummies to represent us. And that's why I'm passionate about this. I think we need to fix things like that.
That's a great point. I wonder how many women were in the room when they decided to actually design the prototype for these dummies, right? And Tana, I want to kind of go back to something that you were saying just now, because, you are very active in the labor movement. You kind of fight for workers' rights against discrimination of any sort, whether that's racial, nationality, education background, or disabilities, right? Tell us, what do you think what do you think of the discriminatory laws in Singapore? We're better than some countries, we're worse off than some countries. Do you feel like workers' rights are as protected here?
Okay, firstly, I would like to emphasize that there's no discrimination law in Singapore. If you look at the labor law, there isn't a discrimination law or any discrimination clause.
If you were writing the laws, would you put that in?
I believe in creating awareness and educating the people and making sure that the hiring practices are more progressive, and rather than putting it in a law. You can have 1001 law, okay? But whether people understand the law and practice accordingly, that's a big question, Whether they like laws to stifle their movement, that's another question. So I think laws must be there to provide the positive outcome. You see, in Singapore, earlier I mentioned it's an open door country, we welcome talents. Having a discriminatory law will send an adverse message to people who really want to come to our shore and make a difference. So that is why, if you look at our government till today, they do not have the law. However, we have this Tripartite Alliance for Fair and Progressive Employment Practice. This is a tripartite organization that ensures that employers have a progressive hiring practices, even performance appraisal practices, and many others, even benefits too, to make sure that it's inclusive. So that it is a long haul, a lot of effort is required. I think recently you may have read in the papers that 300 companies are under the watch list, okay, of MOM.
What are they under the watch list?
Watch list. Okay, watch list means they have been bad employers, not practicing progressive hiring, or they have been discriminating against certain group of people, in terms, yeah?
Oh, yeah. can continue.
Yes, thank you. So these 300 companies are now under the MOM watch list. So you can see MOM actually looks at fair, progressive, practices at workplace very, very seriously. If not, there wouldn't be a watch list. Watch list means these companies will not have special privileges. In fact, if they were to apply for S-Pass or work permit, it will be very, very slow or last to be considered or even cancelled. Okay, they are not allowed to have talents, so-called talents from overseas to come here. So it's to make things difficult for them until they become better employers. Having said the awareness and education part, we have a long way, because if you look at our STEM industry, I think earlier she alluded to this, the STEM industry, the science, technology, and engineering and maths, in terms of diversity is very poor, gender diversity. It is male dominated across, and we have to do a lot more from school, from home and from school. It doesn't start at the workplace. We cannot go to the company and say start hiring women when women are not forthcoming to be hired in that kind of industry. I can safely say that many of our young female students who take up STEM programs in school, even within my family, they don't end up in STEM industry. They prefer office office kind of environment, the aircon, working behind the desk, or they like to fly and they work in the airline. So because they are young, they want to diversify their so-called prospect in employment. They want to try new things. But by the time they are ready for a real job, serious job, so they are missing out a lot. Because they graduated as an engineer, but they are not there.
They didn't. Jennifer, I would love to, thank you for that, Thana. So, on the point that Thana made, she was saying that women are educated in STEM. There are a lot of female STEM graduates, but then there are not enough of them going into the industry. Do you feel like it's just because women don't want to work in that industry, or do you feel like, hiring biases, especially similarity bias, is a real thing, and most engineering teams are male-led, and we've kind of seen where there are all male engineering teams, etc. What are your thoughts on this? How much of it is women wanting this thing for themselves? How much of it is structural?
I think that is a very good question, and I have to say, I would say it will be a combination of both. In some companies, I have to say, so when I was in consulting before, I actually witnessed a lot of companies, a lot of tech companies actually, that was, I would say, a combination of both, but mainly because of the recruiter's attitude. It's very easily to fall into a brotherhood type of recruiting.
The bro culture.
Yeah, because, and I think it's sometimes not necessary is those recruiters' fault, because they just pick people they are used to and people they feel comfortable working with, but without having acknowledged the importance of diversity. But I'm also very glad that I see progressions over years, that a lot of growing company, for example, my own company, as well as along with a lot of fellow tech companies, right now are actually acknowledge the importance of these topics and really take actions, as I say, from the process points of view, from the evaluation point of view, make sure people don't just go to the people that they are very familiar with or feel comfortable working with in the beginning. And we're actually just chit-chatting about that a lot of guys actually realize that when they have their own daughter, because they will realize that they want their daughter to be treated equally at the recruiting process, so they will be more conscious when they're doing the recruiting process. But having said that, we cannot wait until every guys have their own daughter and start to make change, right? So, but I think having the awareness and try to advocate the concept, I think it's very critical, and I'm also very glad to see progression across the tech industry day by day.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Jennifer. And I like that you brought up the point of like bro culture and how sometimes recruiters see people who are like themselves and feel like that's the criteria for success. So Chitra, I want to talk to you about how this also applies to VCs, right? Because like we've heard like some Silicon Valley VCs say that, the next success story is going to be like how Mark Zuckerberg or Evan Spiegel was, like white, young males who are from like Harvard or Stanford, etc. How do you kind of like make sure that you're not, biasing yourself towards that framework when you're making investments?
I think, firstly, it's interesting, but I think if you look at the VC community now, particularly after the Me Too movement, there is a lot of focus on putting young women out there in terms of founders. There's a lot of the large VC funds have money specifically set out for women founders. Now, again, that's a part almost like affirmative action, right? Should we force women founders and set aside $1 million, which we may or may not use every year because we're waiting for a woman to found a company? But I think it's a positive step in that direction. So we've got a group, in fact, of about, I think it has close to 300-400 women across the world in a VC community on WhatsApp. And we try to create opportunities for each other, and we try to make sure that if somebody has a startup idea, let's at least guide them in the right direction to get them to be more successful. So I think it's starting to happen. I think the opportunity to make it happen started from a negative place, which was the Me Too movement, but negative and positive. It's good that, people are willing to speak out, they want equal rights, and I think it's moving in the right space, even with VC.
That's nice, and I like that you're kind of creating this concept of like an inclusive girls club because there's so many boys clubs in VC.
I think we're at the risk of, being gender biased here a little bit. Yeah, more opportunities for women than men.
Okay.
Reverse gender bias.
So one of the things you mentioned was affirmative action, and that was actually something I wanted to talk about when it related to board diversity. So if you look at like most boards in Singapore, I think we're at about 15% right now or lower for SGX listed companies, and this sets us way below countries like India, Malaysia, and let's not even mention like Finland and Norway, etc. Right? Tana, you were kind of talking about this movement to have more women on boards. How do we really get more women on boards? And what are your thoughts? Like, do you feel like we need affirmative action, or do you feel like there are other ways to encourage employers to do this?
Yeah, I would say that I think we must do our part and do it in our utmost manner to try and strive towards a higher percentage of board membership for female. We have to exhaust all means, always, before even thinking of a quota, affirmative action that you talked about. So if that's the case, we have to ask ourselves, have we done enough? Have we done enough to bring women who are talented, who are able to contribute, into this arena? If we have done our utmost best and we have exhausted of all other ways, then probably the last resort could be affirmative action. The reason being, fundamentally, Singapore believes in meritocracy. When you talk about meritocracy, means we provide the job to people who can deliver, whether you're female, male, or whichever nationality, or whether you're a person with disability. So that was a philosophy, since time immemorial, and we embrace and we preserve that. So with that kind of philosophy a country has, putting things in a law or putting it as a doctrine will be a real challenge. Even in the parliament, when I talk to some of the female colleagues, they personally feel that it should not be a token. It should not be a token. I read an article in Finland, or one of the Scandinavian country, I cannot remember which country. What they have is, they have a quota system. A board should have like 50-50. 50-50 composition of male-female, gender. And over the years, they found themselves, they're circulating the same women in almost all the boards. and the women get very exhausted, It is like that few women who are talented, and because you need to meet the quota, and the same women is seen in many, many other boards. So you're circulating talent, and at the end of the day, that talents get too exhausted, and the women are saying, I'm ultimately in so many boards, So we don't want a case as such.
Interesting. So what you're saying is that even if you have affirmative action for these things, it might just be something that companies fulfill on face value, but it doesn't actually change the underlying things. That's interesting. Now, I want to go back into a little bit about your own personal leadership stories, ladies. Could you tell me about when you first took on your very first leadership role, and how do you feel you've grown from then to now? Jennifer, maybe you could start us off. And share with us very candidly about some of the mistakes you've made and learned from as well.
Yeah, sure. So, so as I mentioned earlier, I came from consulting background, and as you can imagine, being an Asian young woman, fresh graduate from college, when I first got my leadership role, my role is to basically convince a bunch of 56 years old guys, and they are in the industry for 20, 30 years. They think they know their business, and I have to go there and tell them, guys, you are wrong. You have to do it in another way. So imagine how difficult it was. And despite I have very professional team and also very professional colleagues, I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. Oh my God. So I was one of the biggest mistake, which I still think I see in a lot of my fellow colleagues, is that I think women, at least I'm speaking for myself, tend to search for approval too much. Back then I was trying to please everyone on the client side. I want every single person celebrating my idea, think this is brilliant,
I wanted to be loved.
I know, and then I think basically I was wasting so much time trying to get approval and got so insecure when people disagree with my opinion. And then I soon realized it's actually not necessary. As long as I'm confident and speaking of my own opinions, and which is fact-based, of course, it's not just, biased thoughts, but as long as it's fact-based and I'm confident with what I have to say, I shouldn't be afraid. And ever since then, when I have to influence the important people, I wouldn't waste time to find everyone's approval. I just go straight down to the decision maker, have my points delivered, and that is probably one of the biggest learning that I have in my early leadership experience.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was very candid of you to share that personal story. Appreciate it. Suchitra, what about yourself? Tell us when you first took on your leadership role, and how do you feel like you've transformed from then to now?
But I guess firstly, leadership is defined differently by different people. I've never personally, I don't know whether it was my parents or upbringing, but I've never personally had respect just because somebody has a title. It was not in me. So you can be the CEO, but if I think that you're there because of some reason, I would not necessarily respect you. So I think leadership for me was first time when I became a manager and I had my teammates then reporting into me. I think that was hard because there is no manager playbook that anybody shares. They have onboarding playbooks, but there's no manager playbook. There's nothing which says how do you manage people with different EQ levels, with different capability, It was, made a lot of mistakes, delegation. I was a control freak because I'm worried that the projects won't get to the clients on time, but you can't run a team, do strategy and groundwork and operational work if you're trying to do everything yourself. So one of the biggest, learnings for me was learn to trust your team and build that trust, which took a long time. But I think in the previous workplace, I had a big team there, and we got to a point of trust where nobody has a clear role definition anymore. It's just, okay, Suchi, you've got stuff on your plate, I'm going to take it up, or somebody else has stuff that's falling off, I'll take it up. and you win, and you play for the team, and the company used to kid about it, and they'd say, oh, you guys are the A team, because you don't complain about the sales guy is not doing product and the product guy is not doing sales, but it worked, and it really helped us. So I think that's one thing I'd encourage you to build strong teams and have trust in each other, and spend time building that trust. It's really important.
Cool, thanks, Suchitra. And Tana, you've held a number of leadership roles in both companies, unions, as well as in our government. Tell us a bit more about your first steps as a leader, and how do you feel like you've grown from then to now?
First of all, I was not born a leader, so I was made a leader. And it is the opportunity that knocks at your door that matters. So you have a choice. You say, no, I don't want. Or you can embrace it, and you can say that, yes, I want to try it. And one of the things that I think to be a leader that's really important is your passion and commitment. I was very passionate about community work, social work, and that drives me. Mm-hmm. And when the opportunity came, obviously you need to get the trust and respect of your fellow team members, because you can't claim yourself to be a leader if there's nobody behind you. There must be a team behind you, and that legitimizes your leadership. So that's what happened to me. So I became a president at the age of 30, in the labor movement. And from then onwards, of course, I grew from strength to strength. And it is the people who taught me, never shy away from learning. You can claim to be a leader, but leaders also need to learn from their fellow, colleagues, teammates, people who volunteers. There's a lot of learning that goes on. It is called continuous lifelong learning, and that makes a solid leader. I'm not there yet, thank you.
I like that you kind of gave that Singapore government plug on lifelong learning there. Just slid it in. So I like that, you guys kind of shared about your candid stories, and especially one of the points that Jennifer made, which is about likability, right? So I was reading this Harvard Business Review article, which was talking about how likability and success don't really go hand in hand for women. What I mean is, apparently the kind of characteristics that men display when they're successful, where they're called, oh, he's a really tough boss, he knows how to drive his team. Women are called ball busters and the other B word. What are your thoughts on this? Do you feel, ladies, that likability and success are inversely correlated for women? Have you seen that in your circles?
Actually, I don't know. As you're asking me that question, I don't think I have ever gone into a workplace trying to be either liked or successful. I just try to do, because I go in because that job or that role or the definition seems to be exciting at that point in time, and I want to put my stamp on it and take it in a particular direction. And as long as, to Tana's point, if we have people backing us within the organization, we will get successful. But I don't know if subconsciously I've tried, being liked or disliked, or I can't answer that question. But I think success is interesting because different people define success differently. Mm-hmm. What I define as success may be another person's, it's all right. So I think, that's where it's really important to me in my heart that I define what I'm doing at SGInnovate, what I want to do, and I think the company, the leadership, they're all supportive of me moving in that direction, and that's very critical. And the fantastic thing, by the way, is it's a by the way reference. We do have 50% women. And the previous role at CEB, I've got some ex-colleagues here. Literally in the leadership team, we were 6 women and 1 guy. So very well represented. So I think that likability thing didn't impact me that much.
What we mean by that is more of the kind of characteristics. I actually have a friend in the audience. Maria, are you still around? Oh, she might have left by now. So anyway, the reason why I was talking was we were having these conversations, and certain characteristics like being aggressive at the right time when you need it, calling the shots, those are seen as more detrimental for women as they rise up. You'd probably get lower scores in your 360 feedback for displaying those characteristics than men would. Do you feel like that's kind of the case wherever you guys have worked, or do you feel like, your organizations are generally above board that?
You're looking at me. I think intuitively you learn to navigate that system. I think particularly once you have kids, and I've got 2 kids, you don't tend to swear a lot, and you express yourself a little bit differently because, the people who are laughing in the audience, I assume you've got kids. So you do change your way of approaching things, and I think you learn how to navigate the system. But yes, I think it certainly does exist, and I'll give you a story. So I do mentor young women outside of the workplace, particularly from STEM. And one of the women in Singapore, she was sharing this story that she is on an engineering manufacturing floor where you smoke up and all of that. And literally, she's the only woman there. She graduated from NUS. She did engineering with everybody else. And she said she manages a team of about 20, 30 male engineers. They were getting late for a delivery of a particular chip to a client. Previously, the way that was handled was the boss would come in, use some very colorful language, typically starting with the F word and progressing on from there, and everybody would buckle up and apologize and get their act together. And she was really, really upset because this hadn't been communicated to her. There was a delay of 2 weeks. The client's going to be upset. And she said she swore. And she said that is not acceptable and raised her voice on that floor, which is typically really quiet. Guess what? She got pulled up by HR. She was told she doesn't know how to control her emotions, and she was transferred to a different team. This is real. This is a story in Singapore.
Exhibiting the same language that...
Absolutely. Because the interesting thing is she learns behaviors from her bosses. But you just swore at me like a year ago, I'm doing the same thing, but not acceptable. So it is a very real issue from that context that they expect women, if you cry or you yell, oh, she's too emotional, she can't handle it.
Yeah, I saw that. How many of you guys have seen that Nike ad with Serena Williams on Crazy? I thought that was like a really good one on how women are called crazy when we start showing any type of emotion, right?
So I think that part is real.
Yeah. Let's move on to the topic of mentorship, and I would love to hear from you guys. It's one thing, and it's great to have mentors, but it's a completely different ballgame to have a sponsor, right? And a sponsor can be male or female. It can be in your workplace or in your personal life. Someone who'd say, "Hey, you should go speak at this conference, build your profile, etc." Are there sponsors in your life that you feel have helped you out, and how do you try to be that for your team members or younger generations that you're mentoring?
Okay, yeah, I think building on the mentorship and the sponsorship things, actually I think it can actually sometimes be a combination of two. So I think I've been lucky that having someone being like a mentor slash sponsor for me. He was my ex-boss. He was a managing director in McKinsey. So just to give you a bit of background on him, he's like an ex-Navy SEAL, so you can imagine his favorite thing is to staring at people's eye until they blink. And I still hold the record that staring at him and without blinking, and then until he's like, okay, I give up. So basically, he's actually opened a lot of doors for me. He, whenever I have to make decisions, for example, I couldn't decide whether to go to business school or not, it was actually for his better interest to keep me around him, to work for him. But he actually encouraged me to go. Also, when I decided to leave consulting, that he gave me candid suggestion on what opportunity he think I should seize. That's why what made me here today, that I joined Appier. So yeah, basically, I feel very comfortable sharing a lot of concern with him because he always put my interests in front of others. And yeah, so he cares about even my personal life, that he forced me to go CrossFit with him every week. So he's such a sponsor, even try to, encourage me to improve my, health and all that.
Keep up with the fitness of an ex-Navy SEAL?
I know, that is pretty hardcore. So yeah, he forced me to do CrossFit. So yeah. So yeah, and I think I'll like try to replicate the same thing for when I was mentoring the junior members or even my colleagues at work, is that always try to be because one thing I like about him is he's always being very fair to everyone. So, and also being very trustworthy, not sharing those personal information outside of, between the group. So that is how I try to mentor and demonstrate sponsorship for my team. On top of that, actually, I think it can also come from some informal setup. For example, as you rightly say, role modeling is so important. Try to be very consistent at work, not, try not to be act as the emotional part, even though I understand it can be just normal emotion outlet, but try to hold more consistent across. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Jennifer. Now, before we move on to audience Q&A, and I hope there are some audience Q&A, guys, I want to ask you guys a rapid fire round, just a couple of questions. Let's keep it to 10 seconds each. We'll go down this row. Name one person you look up to and why.
Mother Teresa. I think it's a common role model that everybody embrace. She speaks less, but she acts more. So action speaks louder.
What about you, Jennifer?
So I would say my father. He actually, so he's an entrepreneur in construction, but he's handicapped in a way. So he can actually not work properly without wheelchair, but he still managed to visit all his construction site and being pretty okay to raise the family. So
that's awesome, grit and perseverance.
Yeah. So.
What about yourself, Suchitra?
I'd have to say my grandmom. She raised me. She's one of the strongest women I know. She didn't speak English. She was married to a gentleman in the British Railways, which meant mixing in with the English crowd. Learned to speak English, learned multi-languages, set up a school in India. The school today has about 4,000 students. So yeah, she's inspiring. Yeah.
That's amazing. What's the best piece of career advice you've been given?
Be you, I think, and don't worry about the non-controllables. I think women tend to worry. The best piece was don't worry about what you can't control.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
Very similar, relax. Everything will be fine, just relax.
Thana, what about you?
Do your best. Do your best, whichever way you think your conscience leads you. That's important.
That's cool. Okay, the last one. If you guys could time travel back and give one piece of advice to your 20-year-old selves, what do you think you would say to her?
This is firstly, I'm going to be a 20-year-old to think what I was thinking then, and I think I would say, do what I've done.
That's great. Don't change anything. You're going to be fine.
Yes, I'm okay.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
Well, I would probably say just experience more, travel more, try more new things. Yeah, seize the youth. That's the best timing.
Yeah, I'd probably say just be you and don't buy chinos.
Don't buy chinos. Cool. We've got time for a couple of Q&A. Can I get a show of hands? Cool. You've done a lot of question asking in a few of our events, so I just want to give anyone else? Okay. Yep. We'll just. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm actually in developer relations in a team that is actually right now 50% female and 50% male. So that's really rare across my organization. And I think just now Suchitra brought up a point around reverse gender bias. One of the things that I have experienced is that people look at me and say that, oh, you're the diversity hire. Your team is the example of a diversity hire. And to be honest, there were guardrails put into place to make sure that the group of people coming in for interviews were, more female than male, just because we had to tip the scales in a certain way. But that was kind of, to me, it's a little bit artificial as well. And I also advocate a lot for equality amongst both genders. So, what do you guys think in terms of how do you manage that in terms of a hiring process to make sure that both the pool of interviewees coming in and the process given for the interviews are equal to both male and female? Yeah.
Do you feel like it comes from a place where you're kind of sometimes made to feel like you're a token hire? Like, does that ever come up?
I think I think yes, from people outside of my team, but I think within my team we do a lot of good conversations amongst both the males and the females to not make it so.
That's awesome. Jennifer, maybe you could start us off. You're in a tech company, and how do you guys think about hiring and making sure that everyone's given an equal opportunity?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, sorry to repeat that again, but I think we value equality over equality. So basically, we try to make sure that at the process, there's no so-called quota. I know it's very common that, so let me give you an example, like in MBA, like Asian females are typically saying, oh, you are such a good bad, you tick 2 boxes at the same time, so that is why you get in. But after being personally in the admission process, I realized actually the process doesn't work that way. So as long as you make sure the process, the hiring process or the admission process are transparent and very clear, there's no so-called quota or bias, I think that is the way to go. And gradually over time, people would understand that it's not because it's not for the sake of diversity that make the team diversify. It's basically you select people from their skills, and by the natural selection, the diversified team will actually stand out.
Yeah. Sounds great. Suchitra, Tana, do you guys have anything to add on before I move to the next question? Okay. Lady in green behind you.
Hey, thanks for that talk. I'd be interested to hear, since 3 of you are all in various leadership positions, is there an example where you've really had to demonstrate allyship or advocacy for either the people at your level or under you against people that are either not willing to listen or are very hostile? So we'd love to hear one concrete example of how you've done that.
So a concrete example of how I did it. Okay. It's going to sound a bit controversial, but okay, there are 2 things I look for when I look at my team culture, right? High performance. I mean, we value performance a lot. The other thing I look for is also attitude and how well you play along with team culture. I don't need you to be a cookie cutter fit, but zero tolerance for basically people who tend to be mean and catty and stuff. So my response to one of it was actually I just fired someone. It was a year ago, and what I realized was it was a guy on the team, and he had a habit of being talking about people, making fun of people, being snide and all of those things, and kind of went on for a couple of months. And I remember thinking, you know what, this isn't the team culture I want. Things are just, and we're such a small team. We're a team of under 10, and it is so important. And at first I was like, holy crap, my team was made up of 1 person in each department. My marketing person is Gabriella, right? So I was dead scared. I was I don't have anyone on this team. But then I feel I talked to our HR team, and it was the best thing I could have done for my team, because team culture improved so much more. It's painful to do those steps, but I feel you just gotta have the balls and do it. Yeah. What about you guys? Were there ever a time when you felt hey, someone's not playing right, and what do you do or say?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to have fired that person.
Well, it happened once, and no, I did not fire that person, but I did, again, it's interesting you raised that question, and as I'm thinking about my response, I did get him moved to a different team, because funnily enough, I did think I might have contributed partially to that equation. Women, we tend to blame ourselves for everything. So I thought, okay, maybe his lack of performance is also something to do with me, because I think as a manager, your chemistry with your team is really, really critical. I tried to move him to a different team rather than to put him on a performance plan, but I was very happy that he'd actually failed in the other team and he was actually let go. So good to know it wasn't me.
Did you then feel like, as a manager, like you would, like, did you feel like people would have seen it as your fault if you had fired that person? Is that why you decided to transfer first?
No, I think it was just, again, this was my initial stage to your early question on my first leadership, first management. Firing people is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah,
it really tugs on your heartstrings, so it's a very, very tough choice. You know, they've got families and, you know, the income matters to them and they won't get a job quickly. So I think it's a hard decision. But in hindsight, again, if I go back to the advice I could give to that person, that was me then, I would probably say just put him on PIP and get it over with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, just so that you guys know, I didn't just walk in one day and fire this person. Like, there was like multiple opportunities given over time, and there was performance.
You didn't do the Donald Trump on him.
No, I didn't like walk in and be like, you're fired. No.
I just want to address a question. You mentioned about advocacy, right?
Yeah.
I think the key to advocacy is persistence. Persistence. If you truly believe and you're committed to the advocacy, there will be people, initially they will not be listening to you, okay? And gradually they feel tired of you. Subsequently, you will have a breakthrough. At least they tend to say, oh, I better take this person seriously. That's what happened to Women Group. I can share a little. You know, we came a long way. In fact, in labor movement, it's 50 years. 50 years of transformation or progress. Advocacy such as gender parity, okay, and abuse and harassment, because normally women are the one that's affected at workplace. So our labor movement has been really advocating this for many, many, many years. But after many years, probably 20, I don't know, more than 20 years, we have seen some breakthroughs. There's been some changes that's happening. In the case of flexible work arrangement, it's advocacy. We want more women to come into the labor market. We've been advocating it for many, many years. And now, this women manpower minister is doing something. She is having the standards being rolled out, and also funding given to employers who actually embrace flexible work arrangement. So you can see that it took a long years to get something done. So persistence is important. You must be committed to it. Trust it will happen. Thanks.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, one last question here, and then we got to wrap it up. I know everyone has work. Sure.
About harassment at the workplace. I've had my fair share of sexual harassment. I believe all of us probably have faced it some way or another. And so how would you deal with that? You know, it has hindered my career development in some way or another. So how do you have that ceiling breakthrough and, you know, move on from there, basically?
Thank you for sharing that with us, and I'm so sorry to hear that happened to you. What would you guys kind of suggest if, like, someone was in that position?
It's a tough one. I mean, to be honest, it depends on the level of seniority of the individual, because I think I've seen it happen that the more senior the guy, the more likely they are to get away with it, with just a slap on the wrist, and it is real. And unfortunately, there's only two things we can do. This is just my personal opinion. One is to make ourselves scarce from that person so we don't work with them in any shape or form.
But
because
do you feel
complaining...
like that actually robs us of opportunities then?
It does, but I'll give you an example. In one of the workplaces, and this is still in Singapore, there was an MD who had a lot of sexual harassment complaints against him. And I clearly remember I was sitting across the table. I was new to the company. The VP of HR, he came in and he slapped a paper and he goes, "That's your 16th sexual harassment filing against you." And literally his response was, he opened his drawer. I was sitting across him. He drops it in there. He goes, "Great, I'll file it with the other 15. Now, he's the MD, but the point is, as an analyst, I don't know how to react to that, right? The VP of HR comes in, so the VP knows it's wrong, the MD knows it's wrong, and you're in that situation. So I'm sorry, I can't really answer that question, but I feel people do get away with it because of seniority. They pull rank. Yeah.
I totally agree. People can get away with it. That's why we need to empower our people. Empowerment is creating awareness and educating them. You know, there's laws that actually protect women. POHA is one act that came about few years back, okay, after our advocacy.
What's POHA?
Is Abuse and Harassment Act. Okay, if you Google, you will know. So there's a protection for anybody, regardless of gender, who get abused or harassed at workplace or even in public spaces, even at home. So if we know what the act does and how can we escalate our predicament, then we can find some respite. That's one thing. The second thing is, at workplace, that's why it is important that we also advocate that especially large companies who can afford to have a third-party whistleblowing services being made available.
Yeah.
You have huge companies that have many employers, some global, and if you have that, anything can happen. Abuse and harassment is somewhat people who just want to do it. They will abuse you, they will harass you, they make your life difficult. You may even lose your job. But don't be afraid, that third-party whistleblowing scheme, if it's available, just blow it. Just blow it. But of course, I've come across, because I also do industrial relations, I've come across the other side of it, where people have vendetta against this person and fakely blow whistle to say that this person has done something wrong. So we also have to manage the situation. The third thing is our Employment Act also have measures to ensure that such complaints are addressed. They call it, committee of inquiry, board of inquiry, where you have panel, that's got composition of male, female, to address issues, and if it is a criminal offense, then report it to the police. So we have to know our rights, then only we can make intelligent decision of what we want to do. So I'm very, very, sorry to hear what had happened to you, but I think if you want to know more, you can contact our NTUC Women's Secretariat. We can advise you on that.
And I think with the Me Too movement, I think men are starting to get aware that they can't get away with nonsense. But you know what? We're about 60, 70 women here. If you do get the courage and you want to do a hashtag Me Too on that individual, I can assure you that this group of women is willing to support you and get behind you on that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think one of the biggest things that's kind of come up in the past 2 years is like people being open to sharing that without feeling like, did I do something wrong? Like, did I bring this on myself? But like people are more open to that. So that's great. I do want to be conscious of time because I know it's a work day and many of you might have like jobs to go back to. So thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today, and thank you so much for being such a great audience. And thank you again, Appier and SGInnovate. Appier for like the awesome breakfast and SGInnovate for the gorgeous space. Thank you.